Welcome everyone to this session titled New Models of Philanthropy. My name is Margarita Albors and I am the president of ChangeNOW Foundation, a global platform born 10 years ago to facilitate the path to those entrepreneurs, investors, corporates and governments willing to make their impact grow. For the next hour, I will be moderating the three parts of this session. For the first and second parts, some of the topics that we will be covering are, for example, how venture philanthropy can build new markets that are beneficial to people and to the planet, and how can the risk impact investing. The third part of the session will also discuss the intersection between social impact, investment, and philanthropy. The social and environmental challenges we face as humanity are complex and wicked, and now especially even more in these pandemic times. So they require new and innovative ways of approaching them. Today, we have the privilege of having experts in philanthropy and in impact investing here with us, and that will go through examples of different experienced organizations working with innovative models of philanthropy. So to start with this session, I will first of all introduce you to Lisa Jordan. Lisa is senior, hello, hi Lisa. Lisa is, good morning, is a senior philanthropy executive with a 20-year career focused on impact and systemic change. She is the founder of AIM for Social Change and managing director at the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, a global venture philanthropy firm supporting early stage, high impact social enterprises. She previously served as CEO of Bernard Van Leer Foundation, CSO at Perticus Foundation, and in leadership positions at the Ford Foundation. Welcome, Lisa, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Margarita. I don't have to tell you or anybody else who is participating in this session that we're living in a time of unprecedented challenges in an era of entrepreneurship that requires resilience and rapid adaptation to be able to respond to the social and the environmental challenges that we're facing. And if you're here at the ChangeNOW conference, it's because you're a change agent. You're asking yourself every day, what will it take to change the world? And if you've joined this session, it's because you want to know, what is the philanthropic sector's response? How is this sector adapting to the challenges of our time? So let's consider together the challenge right in front of us in a traditional field in which philanthropy is engaged. The field I'm going to use today is education. Education, as we know, has been absolutely decimated across the globe. In every country and in every community, the right and opportunity to learn is further out today than it has ever been in the last 50 years. Yesterday, I was on the phone with one of our entrepreneurs from India, and I heard that public schools, meaning government-funded schools which serve the poorest children in the country, may be closed for 2 straight years. If you put this in market terms, it means that the education supply chains have literally seized up overnight. All of a sudden, everyone is vulnerable. Schools are closing worldwide. Students and teachers do not have access to each other. Lunch and breakfast programs that poor families rely upon for meals are immediately unavailable, and millions of children are going hungry. Parents who are poorly, like me, or not at all prepared are suddenly thrust into the role of teachers. And if you're a parent, you can relate to this challenge directly. So as these traditional systems freeze and our delivery systems are failing, public and private, we in the philanthropic sector who focus on early stage social entrepreneurs, foundations that are aligned and in tune with the era of entrepreneurship that we're in right now, have witnessed absolutely remarkable reactions. Pop-ups and push-throughs have become signatures of early stage social entrepreneurs. So what are these things? Pop-ups are new initiatives that are created rapidly to address very urgent problems, and push-throughs are rapid reactions taken by social entrepreneurs to push through the crisis. Push-throughs are creating changes overnight in big systems that we've known for years are necessary. So people, the organization that I was speaking with yesterday, this is one of DRK's portfolio organizations in India, whose mission is to focus on learning outcomes in the public school system. People has been able to deliver over 1 million training programs in the first 4 months of the Indian lockdown, which expanded its reach from 30,000 children to 10 million children and 500,000 teachers. How did it do this? It digitized its entire teaching training program online, put it online with a delivery system that operates through a very simple phone and offered certification, and did this within 4 weeks of the beginning of the lockdown. So this is one example of a push-through where a whole system changes around teacher training. Digital Bridge, a pop-up in the US, was created by an organization called Education Superhighway. And within the days of the schools closing, Education Superhighway created a super spot by utilizing school buses and other resources that were sitting idle so that children who do not have access to broadband at home could access digital learning opportunities. That was 30,000 children in the city of San Francisco, which was the first to set up these kinds of super spots. So both of these organizations had already developed the relationships they would need with the private sector and the government to pivot in the pandemic. They also had a very active philanthropic partner that provides lean-in operating support. That's us, that's the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, which was one of the first to provide financial resources to Digital Bridge and actively negotiated with Sprint and other telecom companies in the United States to get fees waived for these essential services for poorer communities. DRK helped People, the organization in India, identify additional resources in order to be able to scale rapidly, lent a hand in structuring the senior team to manage rapid growth, and helped to make the case with the board for rapid scaling. So this is a story of how one philanthropy is responding to the era of entrepreneurs who are solving complex social problems at scale with support from a new model of philanthropy in real time and in the face of unprecedented pressure from the COVID-19 pandemic. DRK, the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, has a philanthropic model that lies somewhere between a traditional philanthropy and an impact investor. We apply market discipline to complex social problems, and we focus on growing early-stage social enterprises that we believe can create outsized social impact. We are a so-called venture philanthropy. We're the oldest venture philanthropy in the United States and one of the largest, with a portfolio of over 180 social enterprises that are both for and nonprofit organizations. So if you're in this session and you're an impact investor, you might think about DRK as a fellow impact first investor. If you're a philanthropist, a corporate, a family office, or an individual, you might think about DRK as your most disciplined peer partner who delivers multiple effective opportunities to address social problems at scale. And if you are in this session and you're an ambitious social entrepreneur, you might think about applying to DRK. We would welcome your application. So at DRK, we find and fund and support early stage social enterprises with exceptional leadership that can scale. And there are 4 basic steps that we take to determine our investments. And the first one is the complexity of the problem. We will only support entrepreneurs with big ambition that tackle hairy, complex problems that manifest themselves at a massive scale, like the problems we're facing in education, like the problems we're facing in hunger right now. All sectors are open for consideration. The story that I shared about education is just one example. I could have shared stories in the fields of health, stories in the fields of social inclusion, stories in the field of climate, renewable energy. All of these fields are in scope for DRK. The second thing we look for is a sustainable solution. Is there a business model behind this solution? If we're looking at a nonprofit, is there a revenue generating model that we can discern? And in both cases of for-profits and nonprofits, what's the end game that we can use to make this model both scalable and sustainable? The third thing that we look for is leadership skills. I think this pandemic has thrown the importance of leadership into stark relief in all sectors. So DRK, one of our principal partners is Rob Kaplan, who's been focused on leadership for decades. He's the K in DRK, and for good reason. At DRK, the leadership capacity of an entrepreneur has to be discernible. And the key to leadership is the ability to listen, to learn, to adapt, and to iterate. Lastly, and I think this really sets DRK apart from both impact investors and traditional philanthropists, can we, as an organization, add distinctive value to the goal of the social enterprise? Can the skills that we have in our team help an entrepreneur crack the code to scale? I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Every single investment we make in DRK is accompanied by a DRK managing director, which is the role that I play, who serves on the board of a social enterprise as an operating partner for 3 years. We have 14 managing directors like me who will move mountains to ensure that a social enterprise grows in order to tackle the problem at scale. And it works. We know it works because we are measuring, like all good foundations, 50% of the portfolio, 50% of the organizations in the portfolio have impacted over 10,000 people. A third of the portfolio has impacted over 50,000 people. A quarter of the portfolio has impacted 500,000 lives, and 21 of the organizations that are in the portfolio are impacting millions, like people. They have cracked the code to scale. Cumulatively, the portfolio has impacted more than 155 million lives. So how does it work? How do we find entrepreneurs in the early stages of their ventures who can crack the code to scale? Well, we pull from a very big pool, which you can see here on the screen. What we're looking for is how an entrepreneur defines the problem. We are looking for the capacity of an entrepreneur to frame a problem super clearly, to break the problem down into bite-sized pieces, and then design innovative solutions for a piece of the problem. And then we then fund these enterprises with grants or with loans, or we take equity in the business. This is another distinguishing feature of the DRK approach. We do not divide our house. Everyone looks at all potential deals. So those of us on the team with deep philanthropic experience are reviewing a deal with colleagues who are investors, who are entrepreneurs themselves, or who have deep sector experience. They're educators, they're doctors, they're lawyers. They are people who come from the field and understand how the solution might fit within the wider sector. So we're looking to determine together whether the business model or the sustainability model is suited to the impact that's being proposed. And sometimes that means that you're looking at a change which lends itself to a loan or to equity. And sometimes the model is just not ready for the kind of pressures investors would put on it, and thus a nonprofit revenue generating model is more suitable for the impact the entrepreneur is seeking. So we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs determining the best fit for impact and iterating the scaling strategy and iterating the solution, because very rarely is the first iteration going to lead to scale. Our secret sauce is the board service and joining these entrepreneurs as an operating partner. We're able to maintain a deep, intensive focus on scale, and we make this possible by developing 6 critical capacities as an enterprise grows. The 6 critical capacities are here. It's looking at the scaling strategy, as we have discussed this morning. It's looking at the fundraising capacity for a nonprofit. It's looking at organizational capacity, meaning all of the systems within the organization and the culture and the leadership and the team. We look at the leadership and grow the leadership skills of the entrepreneur. We look at the board. Very often we are the very first independent board members coming in. And if you are an impact investor and you are looking for a way in which to protect the impact as an organization becomes more attractive to commercial capital, you will want to have a board that's aligned on values. It's one of the things that we aim for, that we look for when we're working with for-profit entities in order to be able to guard the impact and sometimes guard against the risk of serving a different non-vulnerable population. And the last thing that we do is help to grow the financial sustainability, both strategically and operationally, of a social enterprise. So DRK is a new model of philanthropy, one that uses market principles and instruments with a deep and abiding commitment to the impact of each enterprise we invest in. By engaging as an operating partner and taking a seat on the board and reviewing the business model and the capital best suited for impact, we bridge these 2 worlds of investment and charity to nurture social change in this era of the entrepreneur. And we're very pleased to be active now in Europe, along with our footprints in India, Africa, Latin America, and the US. And while we know that our model is very unique in Europe, there are many other innovations in the field of philanthropy that we will hear about today that are also responding to the need for innovation and that are responding to this era of entrepreneurship to create change now. So nothing opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. And congratulations for the great work that you are doing. And please stay with us for the next panel, because we are going to welcome now Roberta Bosurgi and Luis de Melo Jerónimo. Hello.
Hi, Margarita.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Roberta.
Hi.
Hi, Luis. Nice to see you and welcome. I'm going to introduce you now to the 2 other speakers. You have already listened to Lisa. Roberta joined EVPA as CEO in September 2020 from Novartis, where she covered international roles in strategy, business operations, and market access. More recently, at the Novartis Foundation, she led a collective impact initiative for cardiovascular health in low-income urban settings, building multi-sector private and public partnerships and working with social enterprises on the journey to scale and financial sustainability. Roberta is a purpose-driven visionary leader with an inclusive leadership style, and she brings over 20 years of international corporate and management consulting experience. We also have here with us Luis de Melo, as I said before. He's the director of the Gulbenkian Sustainable Development Program. He joined the Gulbenkian Foundation in 2006 and worked at UK branch of the foundation between 2009 and 2010. He has served as various positions of responsibility in the foundation since then, and he is currently member of the board of directors of the European Venture Philanthropy Association, EVPA, and non-executive board member of MACE Impact. So, well, let's start with our panel. I think we can say that we come from a bipolar world. Philanthropy on one end versus investments for maximization of financial returns on the other. In the past years, more models of possibilities have emerged to align capital and values. So, Roberta, can you briefly explain the models that have emerged between traditional philanthropy and pure financial investments? And maybe also talk us about where the EVPA members fit in this new spectrum.
Thank you, Margarita. Thanks a lot for the question. And I think it's a great pleasure to be here and to follow such a keynote from Lisa, because I think she explained very well the emergence of the space in between the philanthropy and the pure investment sector. I mean, this is still very widespread consideration. Many people think that on one side of the world there is the world of philanthropists focusing purely on impact, and on the other side, the other extreme, the investor just maximizing the risk return ratio. Luckily, in the last 20 years, there's been a great development in this middle ground of what we call at EVPA, investors for impact, that maximize impact, managing the risk tolerance of the investment and adapting financial instruments to the needs of the enterprise and to the context, the market context. I think Lisa explained and made many examples of this approach where financial instrument is a means to an end rather than a purpose in itself. And so depending on the readiness of the market to generate revenues, or depending on the need of the enterprise, investors for impact deploy different financial instruments. That could be grants at the beginning to scope a market, and then could be a subsidized loan that can be eventually converted to equity when is the time to scale up. But I think this community of investors that sit in this zone in between philanthropy and financial investment all come together and embrace some key principles. One, everyone have a very long-term perspective and very patient capital attitude. I think that needs to be very, very clear. Impact is not a short-term affair. We're talking about 8-10 years turnaround to impact a scale. And then, as we said, there is an element of tailoring financial instruments depending on the market, an element of high engagement. So Lisa made the example of board seat, operational engagement, advice, leadership coaching. This is a key component of the model that are emerging in the middle. And last but not least, this relentless commitment and focus on impact, both measurement and management. And many of the investors that sit in our community focus either on one specific part of the life cycle of the social enterprise, or deploy funds using different vehicles. So you're talking about foundation to deploy grants, impact fund to deploy proper investment instruments, but another play across the board, but all come together with a strong focus on impact and long-term engagement.
Definitely, thanks. And Luis, can you please explain us where your foundation fits? I mean, in this kind of a spectrum. I mean, how the Gulbenkian Foundation embedded these new ways of doing philanthropy.
Sure. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity. I actually feel quite humble, and it's really a privilege to be here in this session with such an amazing leaders like Lisa, Roberta, and you, Margarita. So I hope what I will share can be useful for this discussion. The Gulbenkian Foundation has a lot of different activities, but the common ground is try to push innovation in order to promote social change. And we are doing this for more than 6 years. In the last 8-10 years, we start to think if we could also innovate in the way we were funding, if there was some like innovations we could follow in order to best meet our goals. And we were not trying to promote this just for the sake of it, was because we were more and more realizing that the traditional funding that was available, both from the traditional philanthropic sector and also from the public sector, that we cannot forget, it's a huge finance provider for these sort of solutions that we are targeting in this session today, were not all sufficient or adequate to the needs of the entrepreneurs and of the solutions that we were keen to promote. So we wanted to, more than like simply develop a new strategy of work for the foundation, was actually how can we work in order to develop an impact investing ecosystem in Portugal, and also based on our experience, if we could learn and also inspire other foundations and other work in other countries. And that's how we started this journey. But as we have learned in the session today, is not simply a matter of having funds available and deploying them. I think at the end of the day, we need to realize that our success is the success of the projects that we fund, the entrepreneurs that we support. So it's not a matter of having the entrepreneurs and the solutions adapted to our rules of the game. We need to adapt our rules of the game according to their needs and according to their needs. And that's why this importance of having this tailored work that both Roberta and Lisa mentioned is so important. It's ourselves as funders that need to adapt to the needs of the entrepreneurs and not the other way around. And another thing that is also important is, of course, funds, skills, and also data. We need to learn more about this, and that's why what Lisa has mentioned about impact. How can we best monitor and this change is so important, because more and more I think we are in a position that this push for impact investing is not simply like a leap of faith. We are actually having evidence of how this actually works. And it was like on this setting that we have started our journey, working both as a market builder and as a market player. As a market builder, we have co-funded the creation of intermediaries here in Portugal, particularly in maize. We tend to neglect the role of intermediaries, but they are quite important, because we need to realize that we don't simply find impact investing opportunities. We need to build them, and intermediaries really play a role on that. We also, if we wanted to promote this market in Portugal, we could not do it by ourselves. So we developed the Social Investment Task Force here in Portugal in order to have all the stakeholders aligned to promote this agenda. And we were quite playing a role in advocacy for a new positioning of our public sector here in Portugal. And actually Portugal is a case study in terms of innovative use of EU funds to promote this agenda. And apart from these market building opportunities, we were also a market player. So we are funding and investing in impact fund, impact VC funds. We are investing in the development of social impact bonds. And of course, we have a line of work that more and more our grants are not simply grants, but have this sort of tailored work that we do with all these entrepreneurs. And the more we work on this sector, the more we realize that if we want to embrace the challenges that we are currently facing, we need to actually give more floor to these solutions and opportunities. Because if we look at the recovery plans that all the countries are now setting up, the issues that they are trying to address are social or environmental issues, but we are not acknowledging enough the role that social entrepreneurs, venture philanthropy, and impact investors can play in this game. So I think these sort of discussions are really, really important to push this agenda forward, because as Liz mentioned, and is the core team of this discussion, the change needs to happen now, because if it is not now, when? So thank you for this.
Thank you, Luis. Lisa, I would like to know what is your perspective regarding why now? I mean, why all these models have emerged? The DRK Foundation has been working for many years, as you were saying before, with this new way of doing things and investing. But why do you think these new models have emerged now or recently?
So thank you for asking this question. And it is also a great honor for me to be in the panel with EVPA, which plays such a critical role in helping all of us share our lessons, and with the Gulbenkian Foundation, which is an absolute leader in philanthropy in Europe. So I'm very pleased to be with Luis and Roberta. Two things. One is that we in philanthropy have kept most of our capital off the table. So we do not use our endowments in the way we followed a traditional path for a very long time with endowments in philanthropy, and used the proceeds or a portion of the proceeds from the endowment to create change. And about 15 years ago, many foundations started to question, why are we not using our full capital spectrum, if you will, in order to create the world that we would like to live in. So there has been a long gestation period, if you will, of foundations asking themselves about how they could create or play a greater role in creating the change that they've set out to create with their philanthropic practice. So one is that the field itself has realized that it's not using its capital to its fullest extent. And the second has been the fact that we are asking more, entrepreneurs and the state and the EU especially, is asking more from markets, and has been asking more from markets for a long time. And so when we ask for a different kind of economy, an economy that's more care-oriented, an economy that doesn't throw up externalities in the way that harm people and planet, we're asking for those externalities to be internalized. And philanthropy is sitting in the marketplace with the bulk of its capital. Why wouldn't it then try to seed new markets and try to de-risk those markets that are necessary in order for our capital systems to actually be more social and more environmentally friendly? So it's both a push and a pull, both from within philanthropy and then from the societal demands on what the market actually delivers on as well.
Mm-hmm. Luis, I wanted to ask you, because when making non-impact investments, the investors take into account financial risk return pairing, right? So how does this change when you invest to make an impact regarding the impact strategy that you need to do when you want to address social and environmental problems?
I think the rationale for developing this from a market perspective is that this is more and more what the consumers want. So the clients are more and more responsible and aware of the positive impact of their choices, and they are willing to commit to solutions that have that positive impact. We also need to take into account that more and more That's what the workforce also wants. And people are trying more and more to use to have a purpose on their work, and willing to make some changes in their job path in order to be more meaningful in their daily lives as a job. So there is this trend that also the investment side is pursuing, because more and more we also need to take into account that there is not a trade-off in terms of like impact versus like financial return. I think there is it depends of course in the maturity of the solution and in the type of the investor that we are bringing to the table. And that is why what Lisa mentioned about the role of the new role that the use of the endowments from the foundations is so important, because foundations are not simply grant providers, they are also financial managing some huge assets in terms of their endowments, and because of their almost fiduciary duty, they have an obligation to to think how can they best use the resources that they have available to push this market. And that's why some foundations are more and more also trying to see how can they use and unlock parts of their endowments to follow this trend. But I know it can seem like a leap of faith, but I really feel that these solutions are the solutions of the future, and some of the biggest economic opportunities of our time are the ones that blend positive impact with financial return. And more, and I think all of us here know examples of ventures that their model, it's a lockstep model, and the more impact that they have, the more financial return they are also achieving. And that's like the trends of the future, and this build on these models that the new economy that we are trying to promote, and this huge challenge that we are facing with the COVID crisis is also putting some urgency on that, is on this new framework for the development of the economy, where we can best balance financial return and positive impact for people and the planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the audience, we may have philanthropic organizations, like Lisa was saying before, that maybe they are willing to be more innovative, or maybe they have already started the path and are facing some challenges. We may also have traditional investors or corporates willing to be more impactful with their investments. So, Roberta, what are the challenges that you see philanthropic organizations starting this new path may face? And maybe if you could please provide us any advice that you will give them to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I always like to start from opportunities, because the challenges are can be quite daunting if you are not, in terms of experience, expertise, as Luis said, also the leap of faith. To change is never easy, but the opportunity for impact is great. And I think I would start from there. We all have realized, and more even the new generation puts us in front of the harsh reality that we are facing, where planetary resources are not infinite, and that the model that we have built over the last century, assuming infinite production gain, it's got big limitation, right, in terms of inequalities. So I think this is the right path, and this is the right way to go. How to go requires a little bit of flexibility. First of all, in the mindset, in not overcoming this binary thinking that is either a philanthropy or a financial shark. I think it's all a matter of optimizing risk, return, and the impact that one wants to create. So organizationally, the mindset, I would say, is the first step. In terms of advice, finding peers organization that have followed that journey is always a good place. Joining a network like EVPA and other market building networks that bring together communities that share the same journey. Over the last 17 years, the EVPA community has grown to about 300 organizations that have different stages of the journey and have achieved many successes that are very happy to share and contribute. So you can start from experimenting with different instruments, even simply from moving from grants to loans, or you can just increase the level of engagement and coaching if you work in a country where the regulatory constraints don't allow you to make investment or to provide loans. Or finally, you could even make a leap of faith and consider creating a new vehicle for that, creating an impact fund if as a foundation you're very limited. But what I would say first, one, focus on the impact that you want to create, integrating and embedding in the mission of your organization, because it doesn't have to be an on-top, nice-to-have things, but something integrated in the strategy. And two, find a place where you can meet with peers that are facing the same challenges, because there is a lot to learn from the ecosystem.
Thank you. Well, time flies, unfortunately, and we just have like a couple of minutes. So maybe to finish, I would like to ask you, Luis, if you could tell us, how do you see the future of these new models of impact investing and how things you think are going to evolve?
I think, as I mentioned before, that the time is now. The time is now. And sometimes if we want to see how can we best, support and develop this agenda, I think sometimes in these discussions we tend to focus too much on on the instruments and not so much in the problems. And I think that's where we need to focus, because at the end of the day, that's our end game. We need to solve or contribute to tackle some of those challenges. And quite unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges that we still don't have fully resolved, and our commitment needs to start there. I think more and more, I think what is important, and I think give us hope, is there is some track record that actually showed us that these models can really play a difference. And I think if we look at this last year, with so many things that have changed, and some of them in quite a negative way, but there was also some upsides. We have seen revolutions in technology that in less than 1 year we have made, I don't know, developments that maybe without this crisis will take 5, 10 years. We have, for instance, seen, although all the challenges that Lisa quite brilliantly mentioned on education, we also have seen the take on technology in education. That was something that until today was not happening. We also have seen some major changes in technology, for instance, on health provision, and that I think give us hope that in the future more and more these models that involve technology, impact, and accessibility to those solutions can play a role. And I think it's also an important matter that at the beginning of this crisis, we thought that because of this crisis, there will be like a backlash in some of these agendas. For instance, on the environmental agenda, on the social entrepreneurship agenda, because the crisis was too huge that the focus will be there. Actually, what we are now realizing is that in order to avoid future crises like this, we need to promote this source of solutions. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we need to take, and with really a note of hope that more and more, I think Lisa, Roberta, myself, you, Margarita, I think all of us that are here in this session know people that are on their daily lives are making a difference, and I think our commitment should be with those person and how can we best support, leverage, and scale those solutions, because the future will be built by those major change makers. And our role is simply to have, put available to them all the resources that we can have in order for them to be successful. So that is it.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Luis. Thanks a lot for sharing with us your experience. And also congratulations on the great work that you do and how you inspire others. And now let's go to go to the third part of this session about new models of philanthropy. So we are going to welcome now Milos Maricic and Nicola Crosta. Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Luis. Thanks a lot for sharing with us your experience. And also congratulations on the great work that you do and how you inspire others. And now let's go. Hi, Milos. Hi. Hi, Nicola.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome. I am going to introduce our two new speakers. Milos Maricic is president of the Altruist League. The Altruist League helps sophisticated philanthropy solve systemic problems by investing in the entire value chain of real change, from social movements to governments. The League operates in more than 90 countries and has pioneered the use of AI in investment sourcing, matching and tracking. Milos has 20 years of executive experience in philanthropy and finance and is author of the upcoming book titled Fixing Philanthropy. So looking forward, Milos, to reading that book. On the other hand, we have Nicola Crosta. He's one of the world's leading experts of impact investing, philanthropy, and nonprofit management, with extensive experience among a wide range of impact-driven organizations. Nicola held senior management positions in the world's top international organizations for a total of 18 years. At the United Nations in New York, Nicola played a key role in helping to define the Global Sustainable Development Goals. So, wow, great expertise we have here for this panel. So let's start with you, Milos, if it's okay. Why do you think we need new models of philanthropy?
Somebody said in the previous panel that we should be focusing on the end game. And in the past, it seems like philanthropy hasn't, on average, been focusing enough on the end game. It seems like over the past few decades, there's never been more philanthropy, and at the same time, inequality has grown, systemic problems have grown, climate action has been quite slow. So, in some circles, people are interpreting that as philanthropy in some ways almost having been complicit with what has gone on in the world rather than focused on problem solving. And these people want change. These people want something new. And this is why we wrote the book that you kindly mentioned. In it, we talk about what we are seeing among these new people, this new push for new philanthropy. And we're seeing six principles, six, so to speak, new pillars. And I will just quickly go through them because I'm also aware of time. So the number one is focus on the entire value chain of change. So you can't anymore just invest in a couple of NGOs in a given context and expect change to happen. You need to target everything from social movements to independent media, the government, sometimes academic institutions or think tanks. So systemic change really has many links in it, and we need to know how to work with all those links. Number two is focus on systemic problems. So not all problems are really systemic. We focus on problems such as governance, preserving democracy, racial justice, empowering women, the climate. Oftentimes, people come to us and say, I've been investing in reducing poverty or improving education in a given context for years and years, and it hasn't quite worked because of these underlying systemic problems. The number three is the embrace of new power. So we've seen over the last few years, grassroots movements, social action, they are filling the headlines. Philanthropy needs to know how to work with them, how to invest in them, how to embrace them, and that is only starting to happen. Number four is we're seeing a shift in the minds of the philanthropists, and somebody talked about that, I think, in the previous panel. Long gone are the days where philanthropy was about feeling good or looking good. For the new generation, especially new young people, philanthropy is something about which they have intrinsic motivation. They're belief driven. They want to do something big in the world, and philanthropy for them is almost like an existential pursuit. Number five is alliances. Often philanthropy makes the mistake of going into a new region, a new context, and just pretending that it is the only thing that exists over there and hoping to create change from scratch. But that's never the case. The ecosystem is always busy with other foundations, international organizations, governments, and sometimes so the good philanthropy, new philanthropy, has learned how to build bridges and how to make others feel good without necessarily taking the credit, but creating the impact. And then finally, the last pillar that we see is just new technology, new financial models. New philanthropy knows how to use the entire spectrum of the financial assets, whatever is appropriate for the given task, and also it is very quick and very good at experimenting with things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, crypto philanthropy, NFT. Anything that comes along, it can prototype and use it in positive and quick ways without necessarily falling for hype. So that's what I'm seeing, and it's a very exciting development. So that's why I wrote the book.
Great. Well, Nicola, can you please tell us, let us know a little bit about one maybe example or case you have worked with in your long experience, where we can see the need of different maybe type of capital deployment that a specific project may have, and how you work with that situation, and so we can have something tangible about these different needs that a project may need in terms of capital, and how impact investing, these new ways of philanthropy can support in that way.
Yes, thank you, Margarita. And by the way, it's really a pleasure to be part of this discussion. I was following the previous speakers, and it was really interesting. So I'm very glad that I can contribute here. Yeah, as Milos also was saying, philanthropy needs to be fixed. I've had the opportunity in the past few years with my teams to oversee the analysis of over 500 foundations, whether corporate or family foundations. And what we found overall is that philanthropy is not delivering the impact that it's supposed to deliver. And that if you look at the philanthropics market, basically as a market, I would say that there is a fundamental problem, basically a disconnect between the supply of philanthropic capital and the demand for that capital. So we see more and more money actually going into philanthropy. Philanthropy is growing pretty much everywhere around the world. So supply is growing, demand is also growing, more and more nonprofits that need that money, but there is a sort of a disconnect. So not many cases where foundations can find the right projects or organizations to fund, and at the same time, therefore, a very inefficient allocation of capital, which means that the organization that need that money the most have trouble finding it. There are luckily some good examples, though, when things actually happen the way they should happen, and I've had the pleasure to take part to the building or supporting some of these foundations. And what I found is that when things actually work, you can see a number of ingredients in place, and you can recognize, and in a way, I believe that these ingredients mirror what Milos was saying in terms of the new philanthropy. You see foundations that put impact at the core of what they do. It may sound like a platitude, but I would argue that most foundations don't really put impact at the core of what they do. Second, you see a real, very strong and deliberate effort in terms of selection of projects and organizations, so robust due diligence. Third, you see that grant making is approached in a new, more modern, smarter way. I always think that grant making, too many people think that it's about how much money do we give. But now we are all realizing that how you give the money is at least as important. So for instance, doing multi-year unrestricted grants is proving to be much more strategic than one-shot project funding. Then monitoring, you see that when philanthropy really works, when that connection really works, you see a genuine, rigorous attention for results. And so serious monitoring. And last but not least, communication. I think that in the new philanthropy, how Milos would call it, or I call it impact philanthropy, communication also is quite different than the past. It's more ethical, more transparent, more fact-based.
Great. I wanted to ask you about something that generates normally a lot of doubts and questions regarding, well, for the people in this space, which is the impact measurement and management. So I would like if you could briefly talk a little bit about how you see this space evolving, and maybe briefly how you work in your organizations regarding this. Milos, maybe if you want to start, we have just 4 minutes, so I'm sorry, but...
Of course, I'm completely aware of the time, so I'll give you an example. It is difficult. That's the summary. I'll give you an example. We were working, for example, in southeastern Africa, trying to do women empowerment in a very big region, and we were targeting the patrilineal model in its weakest links. So child marriage, polygyny, and the rights of women to inherit property. And so because of that, with a systemic approach, we were working with anybody from village elders to organizations that could give money to women, jobs to women so that they can become financially independent, all the way to the government level and policy. And measurement is different at different levels. So the impact investing schemes are already difficult to measure in terms of impact, but they're extremely easy when you compare them to, for example, measuring the effectiveness of your investment in grassroots movements. So we developed a full AI model that uses techniques from Lasso to NLP just to be able to track what's how these investments are proceeding and having success in growing their membership. And then at the policy level, you have to measure things like new legislation and things like that. So it's, in summary, it's very difficult. It has to always be a mix, just like the investment side is a mix. Also, the measurement side and the other side is a mix, and it's always going it's going to be different in every context.
Nicola.
Measurement in 1 minute. That's the challenge. Let me just say, some time ago, I wrote an article that was called Goodbye Monitoring and Evaluation, Hello Monitoring and Collaboration. It was a way to say that, in my view, we really need to rethink the approach to impact measurement and monitoring and go towards a more collaborative one, so less top-down, the donor or the investor trying to control impact, or that doesn't work. We have seen it. There needs to be a culture of collaboration around the impact, supported by robust tools and technologies. I think that those are the key ingredients.
Well, thank you so much to Milos, Nicola, and also our previous speakers. Thanks to you all for your interest and your time. We hope that you found these sessions valuable and you can take some takeaways with you to help you in your path towards impact. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye, thank you.